So, as a Fife kid, she grew up in the Ifakasa, the mother church, as a member of the Sunday school, choir, youth, women's fellowship, and the congregation. For the last 14 years, she has served under the ministry of Reverend Isaako and Loretza Matautsio of the Ifakasa of the village of Masausi. Hailing from the renowned villages of Nuuli, Fangasa, and Saliaumua, and currently residing in Masausi. She is a proud alumni of the Samoana Sharks, American Samoa Community College Chiefs, and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. She has received an AA in liberal arts from our local community college and an English BA from Gonzaga, which allowed her to teach literature in the Catholic education at the home of the Crusaders and Cougars, Faasao Marist High School. She was an active teacher in and out of the classroom, offering her support in academics, athletics, and life. Even as she made a career switch to serve the people of American Samoa with the Workmen's Compensation Commission Office, she continued to remain present and diligent in the lives of her students. She believes the youth is the key to a better tomorrow because change lies in their hands. But we must come together to lead, nurture, and support them in any way possible and watch the magic happen. Togetherness can go a long way. And one proverb stated, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Without further ado, here is a humble servant to the youth and all of American Samoa, Mr. Oa Matautio. Mr. Oa, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you again for the time for having me. But I would like to go ahead and start. So the topic for today is leading the new norm. And I wanted to specifically speak on behalf of, well, not on behalf, I'm no longer that young, but but I wanted to speak on the experiences the youth may have encountered with drug abuse. So as I was saying earlier, leading the new norm, and I was specifically going to speak on the epidemic of drug abuse and substance abuse that affects our youth of American Samoa. If I could get the next slide, please. And yes, I said epidemic. I know we're also facing the pandemic of COVID-19, and then we have the monkeypox coming in. We have the flu season coming up, and it's just like a whole lot of like actual sicknesses that we're going through. But then there's also the epidemic of drugs and drugs and substance abuse that is definitely affecting our youth of American Samoa. Next slide, please. So what is the issue? If you could click. It is no longer a secret that American Samoa has a drug problem. We see it, we hear of it, and we're definitely living through it. Every day on the front page of Samoa News, there's something that's drug related, whether it's domestic violence, sexual abuse, there's an assault, there's theft. And it's sad because these are all different levels of violence, and these are all different types of crimes, yet they all seem to have that same source. And majority of the time, it is definitely because of drugs, or there's drugs involved. When I do say drugs, I'm not just saying like, go ahead. When I'm saying drugs, I'm not just saying like, oh, it's just like ice, marijuana, narcotics with like the abuse of opioids and stuff like that. But I'm also talking about the lesser, I wouldn't know how to say it. The legal drugs, which is like tobacco and then alcohol, because those are like, we see it every day, and then they're also like bought from the store. So it's like you have access to those kind of drugs. Moving forward. Yes. So like I said, when I say drugs, I'm talking about alcohol, I'm talking about tobacco, I'm talking about methamphetamine, which is ice. And then there's also marijuana. There's other drugs, but I feel like these were the top 4 that I've experienced while teaching at Fasao Marist. As an English teacher, I would allow my students to do a lot of journal writings. I know John can agree to that because I felt like that was probably the best way for me to learn from my students and to like at least see who they were in and out of the classroom. So the experience there, it was definitely humbling and it was definitely very educating on the fact that these 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 15, 14-year-olds are going through so much that you don't expect people in their age to go through. So it was very like, wow. I felt helpless at moments because these were kids that I deal with 8 hours a day from Monday to Friday. And I felt like I couldn't do much to help them in ways that they needed to be helped. Next slide, please. So some of the factors that I've noticed from teaching in FASAO, and it's not just FASAO Marist that I'm talking about, it was being a teacher gave me the access to the youth, and I was able to pick up on these factors. If you could go ahead and click for me. Definitely peer pressure. Peer pressure was definitely there. And then the activeness of people on social media in our society, curiosity and wanting to explore, self-medication and escape. And then there was also the emphasis on the lack of involvement from family or the history of family being involved with addiction. So when I say peer pressure, it was very common for you to be like, you hang out with a certain group of friends, so you have to like you want to be one of the cool kids, you want to be popular, so you see the kids like, okay, they're smoking, they're drinking, and you're like, all right, if they're doing it, then I should do it too. And that also goes into social media. We know like there's so many social media platforms out there nowadays. There's like TikTok, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's like so much out there. And our youth today, they're very prone to electronics and technology, so they're always on there, and they're like these little cameras, right? I would compare the youth to cameras. So they're kind of like the monkey see, monkey do kind of generation. So they feel like whatever they see on social media and it's trending, they want to do it in reality. And whatever they see in society, which, as I said, it's no secret that American Samoa has a drug problem. Like just driving down my street, you would easily detect who's like not in their right state of mind with what they're doing on the road. They're like talking to themselves. They're like dancing on the road. You see all these crazy things, and they're automatically you're like, okay, dang, this person is on it. You don't know what it is. It could be inhalants, because people they inhale gasolines, like markers. I know growing up, it's so common. It's like these little stuff that we do that we don't have no idea. It's actually like pouring into these like negative vices and stuff. And then another common factor that I noticed being exposed to the youth was their curiosity. And I know there's a saying that goes, the curiosity killed the cat, which no pun intended, but it makes sense, the reason why they would say that, because sometimes we're so curious about certain things that we tend to like not think straight because we're like, okay, I just want to do it. I want to get into it. I want to know how it is without really evaluating the consequences or what you're walking yourself into. And the other one would be the self-medication or escape. And I say this because in a lot of the journals that I read, it was like they were going through so much trouble, like whether it was relationship wise with their boyfriends and girlfriends, relationship wise with like their friends, relationship wise with like people at their church, your cousins, your siblings, and then your parents. And you're just like, you would expect people to go home because that would be their sense of security. But from my experience, it was like home was the place they wanted to escape. And me hearing that or reading that, it hurt me because I'm like, man, if you can't feel safe in your own home, where else are you going to feel safe at? And that was one of the factors that led these kids to like um, uh, participate in drug use, whether it was alcohol, whether it was smoking, whether it was hardcore drugs with the ice and stuff like that. And it was just mind blowing. And then it was even sad because they felt like they couldn't have the support from their family. They, most of them, they had to be adults at such a young age because either like their parents weren't really focused on them, their parents had their own problems going on, and it was like these kids, these like 17-year-olds, these 16-year-olds were left to like fight life or fight the world, with no one to like guide them, to nurture them, to lead them. So again, I can't help but keep saying it was definitely a mind blowing realization, and it hit me so hard that that these kids at a young age were going through so much that I wouldn't even imagine my own nieces and nephews going through. But it's reality. It's out there, and we have to acknowledge that to address the problem. Because if we keep saying like, oh, they're 16, they can't be going through all that. But like, it's that mentality that keeps us from being able to help these kids. Or the more we deny the facts that are given to us, the harder it is for us to help. So moving on to the next slide. Let me know if I'm speaking too loud or this is just a topic I'm so passionate about when it comes to the youth. So how is the youth affected? You could click on me on the screen for me, please. So the youth is definitely affected with like mental problems. And I say mental problems because you notice the personality disorders, you notice the change in behavior, you notice depression. And the thing that really hurt, that's really baffling is suicide. And it's difficult because when you think of suicide, that's like one of the it should be a high priority to like ding ding ding, you notice it, so you should do it. But it's like suicide is one of the silent killers, just like diabetes. On our island there's such a high rate of diabetes, and we know it as a silent killer. But I also believe depression leading into suicidal thoughts, attempted suicide, and the actual suicide, it's another silent killer, because these are some of the illnesses that we can't really detect, because it's so common. Like from my experience of people that have committed suicide the past couple of years, and we've noticed there was like a year we were just like back to back on back, like literally back to back suicides. And it was always the people that was determined to be the happy ones. It was always determined to be the ones that were the clowns, the jokester of the group. And I believe that and then I noticed that these should be something that we should acknowledge. It's always the ones that are always smiling, that act like there's nothing wrong in the world. Those are people that we really need to look out for, because they're so good at hiding how they feel. And I just wish there was more signs that we can detect it. But unfortunately, with mental problems and personality disorders, depression, suicidal thoughts, attempted suicide, and suicide, I put those in 3 different ones, because sometimes it's very common. You would think of suicide, but you would never do it. I know some people say like, oh, once you think of suicide, you're going to do it. I disagree. I definitely disagree. You can think about it, but not attempt it. But then there's also like people who don't even think about it, but they just automatically attempt it. And then there's suicide itself, where they become successful. if that's how you put it. I know it's a very touchy subject. It's touchy to me too. Being, like I said, being exposed to the youth and being a teacher, it really it really puts you in a different mindset and a perspective, and how like the youth processes situations, whether it's pain, and they process things differently from my generation growing up. We were very hardcore, like, oh, like these little stuff, like, who cares, or like, that don't phase me. But then like the generation nowadays, it's like they're very sensitive, is how I would put it. They're very sensitive, and they're very what is it, babied. So they're like just the smallest thing, and they're already like, oh, this is it, I'm down, I have nothing else to live for, there's no purpose. But all of that leads them into finding that escape I was talking about in my previous slide. So this escape, or this self-medication, leads them to like cigarettes, alcohol. At the very maximum, it would be like hardcore drugs with the ice and marijuana and whatever else that they may have access to. So that is definitely some of the ways that I've noticed about the youth being affected by it. And I know I'm not the only one who sees it, and I'm not the only one who hears it. And like I said, we're definitely living through it. Next slide, please. All right. The negative impacts on the drug abuse or the substance abuse on the youth today is that it definitely puts a strain on the relationships, whether it's with family and friends. And I would also say church, because you see these kids, they stop going to church because they feel like, if God can't help me, my family can't help me. So what's the point, you know? And then there's also the negative impact of being involved in crimes. And I've witnessed that. We see like the crime rates going up, and it's always the youth, the age group of youth from like 25 to like 16, 15. And you see these babies, they're babies, and you see them out there like doing all these crazy stuff with like the burglary, the theft. There's so many break-ins in American Samoa as of late. And the leading factor is always because of like drugs. And it's just like, wow. And then you also have like the youth rate going up with arrests, and it's just like, when is it going to end? When is it going to stop? Like, how are we going to approach this? And then another impact is your personal health. You're killing yourself by participating in these activities. You're like, there's going to be like mentally, you're going to be mentally affected. You're going to be physically affected. You're going to be emotionally affected. Mentally is like, you're going to lack the judgment. You're not going to have the good judgment to like make decisions wisely. And you're going to have like memory loss and stuff like that. And then physically, you see the effect that it has on people on our island. The people that were always like chunky and chubby, like very well fitted, and you can see meat on their bones. You see them like a couple months later, they're like just skin and bones, like nothing else there. And it's also affecting them emotionally, because you no longer have that that connection, or that emotion connection with like people that you love. You know, you no longer care about the people that you love, because now all you're worried about is, what do I need to sell, and how do I get this next fix? Because you're coming down and you're just like, I can't deal with reality, so I need to go. I need to find another vice. And I feel like those were the main impacts that I've noticed. It was definitely putting a strain on the relationship with family and friends, your church groups, the involvement in crime, the arrest, and then your also your personal health. If I could get the next slide. And then, of course, what can we do? I didn't come up with it. It's not original. But the first thing that I thought of that helped me help the students or help the youth that I did encounter was listening. You have to listen. You have to listen in order to understand. You have to listen in order for you to learn what's going on in their minds, what is going on in their lives, what contributed to leading them to doing what they are doing now. And then from learning about it, you can also use that to your advantage and help inspire them in a different way. Inspire them in like finding a different vice. If your vice is drinking, I would recommend doing something else. I think for me, my biggest inspiration for my students or for my kids, or for any youth that I've encountered was inspiring them to write. If you feel like you can't trust anybody or you don't have the connection with anyone to like tell them how you feel, I inspire them to write. And that's why I was always big on journals. I was like, you every day it was like a journal. And I wanted them in that way. If they can't talk to me directly because they feel like, oh, I don't want to get judged, I don't want to be punished, I just wanted them to talk to me about it. So I always have them write journals, and that was my way of inspiration because I feel like if they were able to put their thoughts into words on paper, that could be a way for them to reread how they thought of themselves or how they see their lives and where they see themselves going. And then S is for seeking help, and this could be like seeking that right person, seeking that right outlet, seeking that right outlet to let all these emotions or all these negativity in you and all the negative experience that you've had in life, and putting it into good use. T is for telling. Either you can tell me, tell your sibling, tell your cousin, tell someone that you feel like is actually going to hear you out instead of just being like, oh, really? And just nonchalant, like pretending to be there, but it's someone that you need to tell that's actually you're not only pouring into them, but they're also gonna be able to pour back into you. So it's not like you're gonna pour into them, leave you, and then they leave you high and dry, or they leave you empty because you've poured so much into them and they can't do the same to you. So and then the other thing is educating yourself on what drugs can do to you, educating the impacts that it does, educating on, the causes and effects, and also just educating yourself in general. If you pour yourself more into your studies or pour yourself into more your passions, you wouldn't have time to think of anything that's going wrong in your life. And education goes back to like knowledge is power. You can do so much when you have so much knowledge. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, you have to pursue higher education. You have to go after your AA, get your BA, get your MA, get your PhD. It's more than that. You have to educate yourself streetwise too, huh? You have to be smart because you can be book smart, but not street smart. But sometimes you need both, or at least a balance of either one. So at least, or if you're lacking in book smart, at least be good in street smart. And and vice versa, you know what I mean? So educating yourself, and educating others on how to help you. People can't help you if you can't help them help you. You know what I mean? So in order for them to help you, you have to help them understand you. You have to educate them on how you feel, educate them on what triggers you, educate them on what you don't like and what you like. And it's like a balance. It's like meet me halfway. It's a two-way street. So, and then N is for notice. Notice the signs. Notice when someone is not acting their usual self. Notice when someone is pretending that they're okay. Notice all these little signs. These little signs are gonna help you dictate or determine whether or not this person needs help. So listen. That's my share for tonight. For today is what can we do? Is listen, learn, inspire, seek, tell, educate, and notice. Where do we start? I would definitely say we would definitely have to start at home. Our first classroom growing up is our home. The four walls that we're meant to be safe in is educating with your parents, um, your your siblings, because these are the people that are gonna go through because so when the minute you go through trouble, your family are the ones that are gonna be there. But it's also hard because as previous speaker have emphasized on, there's so many taboos that we can't openly discuss with our families. And I feel like that needs to go. There shouldn't be a subject at home that has to be taboo, and let alone in our home, but in our culture as well. Because if we don't get rid of those taboos, this problem that we're facing with sexual abuse, the shame on the LGBTQ, the drug abuse on the youth, none of these problems are going to change or are going to end if we don't stop those taboos from happening. And it starts with our families, because if our culture can't change it, at least we have to start small. It doesn't matter how small, but we have to start somewhere. And it starts with removing these taboos, even with churches. So family, friends, and churches, those are all these are the main groups where you have these taboos on what you should be openly talk about, because if you can't talk about it, how are you going to get the help that you need? I think there's also been a helpline during that year where we've had numerous suicides from the youth. We had a helpline, and I encourage those. It's very important, because at least you're talking to someone, but you don't know who it is, and they can't judge you because they don't know who you are, right? And I think that's another thing, because I think that's why it's so easy for us, run into someone, I don't know if it's a bus or something, I can't say train or stuff like that because we don't have trains down here, unfortunately. But on the buses, or when I would go to the hospital, I would sit there and there's someone talking to me, and I'm just okay. And then out of nowhere, I'm having a conversation that I would normally not have with my family members, because they don't judge me or they don't know my story. All they know is what I'm going through. And it's so easy for us to communicate that way because there's no history there, right? So I feel like that's another reason why helplines are so helpful, because you don't know them, they don't know you. All they know is the problem, and that problem is usually universal. So it's good to have that, and I think it's also important that we have a rehabilitation center. And I feel like our government and our island is definitely moving slow to approach that rehab, because there has been so many talks throughout the past years. There was even funds that were coming in for rehabilitation centers, but it's 2022 and I still don't see a rehabilitation center. And then they wonder why there's repeating offenses with drug-related crimes, right? Because these people are just committing a crime, they go to jail for a certain amount of time, they come back out. It's the same thing. They still have access to this thing. They still have they were never really rehabilitated. They didn't get the treatment that they needed. And going to prison is more of a punishment instead of a treatment, It's just oh, you're just going to be punished, and then you go back out and you do it. But if you have a rehabilitation center where you get the treatment that you actually need, we can do better. And it also goes into support group meetings. I don't know if there was an AA meeting. Usually it's for people with alcohol addiction, and they get together into these groups, and you get to speak on your problem, and you have a group of people that understand you, because they too are fighting the same battles. And I feel like if we incorporated those in our island and stuff like that, it could be a very life-changing moment for our youth and for anybody that's going through these abuses. I know for programs in place, I always refer American Samoa Against Domestic and Sexual Violence to everybody that I encounter. I'm if you guys are going through some stuff, whether it's family related, relationship wise, I would visit Alliance. Alliance is always there for you, more than Blue Sky is. I also know that the American Samoan Criminal Justice Planning Agency is there, and hopefully that they do what they need to do, and help implement the a rehabilitation center for American Samoa. I know when our former governor, Lolo Molina, he also had the American Samoa Drug Control Commission in place when he was in office. And then just about 2 months ago, Honorable Limanu also put out the American Samoa Comprehensive, sorry, that was definitely a typo, Substance Abuse Council. So hopefully with all these in place and starting from our homes and our churches and stuff like that, moving into the government and our culture as a whole, we could be able to make some changes happen. If not for us, for the youth, because if there's anything we need to be, if there's anyone that's capable of changing things for us, it'll be with the youth. So it's important. Next slide, please. And I think that concludes my presentation. I'm not sure if I have anything else up next, but I believe that was everything that I wanted to speak on. Yeah, and my selected proverb for today was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you got to go together. So thank you so much for my time. Thank you, Alliance. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to all. Your conversation was so strong, and I believe that there is so much that you could have. There's like a lot of things that we could do together as well. Um, there's so much passion and so much love in your conversation, and I absolutely felt every word that you were speaking on. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, especially about like the different individuals and the different backgrounds that these kids come from. It's crazy to think that we're living in it. Like we're going through this whether we like it or not, and it's coming at us. And so with listen, like your acronym is such a great example for us to use and follow, because that way we have like at least somewhere to start, somewhere we can start and then make our way to bigger moves. And I totally agree with you on that about the rehab, where we need to have one here, because if you implement so much negativity after whatever, and it keeps going, it's gonna be hard for those to understand whether they're doing things because they want to do it to get out of reality, or to do it because it's just all they've known, you know?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you very much for sharing that information with us and for having such an amazing slide. So much information that I think everyone should be able, and there's some things that resonate with each and every one of us. So thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Tawa, or do they have any comments? You guys can use the chat box as well. I believe I had a question.
Okay, yeah. I was just about to say, I think I see a question.
Yeah, I wanted to know, like, as someone who sees the youth, what's the hardest thing to come to terms with in regards to like seeing these individuals when you teach them or see them in school, and then by the time they grow up and they're an adult, like you see them around, like in a different headspace. Like, how does one deal with that?
Thanks for the question. That was definitely a good question. I think that's one of my biggest fears in life, is seeing these pupils that I spent so much time pouring life into and education into, unfortunately not making it in life. But, but I still have, I still believe in them. I still believe that there's still time to like turn their lives around or make things right. I've had an experience with a few of my former students who ended up in the jail system and stuff like that. And during that whole time, I still didn't I didn't forget about them, because it's so common. Like you're so many people are only there for you during the good times. When it becomes a bad time, they're just like keeping their distance. But not for me. I feel like my connection or my bond was stronger than ever when it came to the fact that The student was in jail and stuff like that. And I was there. I supported him. I wrote him letters. I showed love to the parents, and I was just making sure to let him know that regardless of what happened and regardless of what mistakes that he did, he still has a support system. I wanted to make sure that he knew that regardless of whatever may have happened, I was still here and I was still gonna listen. And he's out. He's doing good. He has a job. He's working, and not just like it makes me happy that he used this negative experience to mold him into a better character, if that makes sense. So it was hard. It was hard seeing him, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I failed. Um, I failed him, but no, I'm just proud because the trial and the triumph, the trial and the tragedy that he went through, he was able to come back stronger, and that's that's more than I can ever ask for.
Just you like hearing you talk about it too is you were there for that person. You were their rock. You were someone who motivated them to be their better self. And so I think we need a lot more people with that kind of headspace because it's it's like we see them but then we don't know if they really want the help or not. But then you taking that first step and showing that it just takes one step to initiate that whole process of being better, being them better selves. So I think that is a great, like, I think that's a really great impact that you've made on that person as well.
Thank you.
I think there's another question. What support do we need to help these students who are going through this? Like, I'm guessing that if there are any other ways that we can help, not only students, but like youth who are unfortunately going through these. Is there anything else that we could do within our families or within our friend groups?
It's it's definitely removing the taboos. We have to have these conversations. It's addressing the problem. It's identifying that we do have a problem because I think that's the biggest thing. We're so in denial. Like people, like even our parents, they refuse to believe it. And even when you say suicide, and they're like, "Oh, that's such a white thing, or that's such an American thing. It doesn't happen here." But unfortunately, it has happened. It's been happening, and it's still happening. Yet we refuse to acknowledge it. I think that's where it needs to start. We need to offer the support of saying um, it's a problem and we should fix it. I think that's where it should start. And going back to what I was saying is listening. You have to listen, listen. And you're not just listening just to have the conversation. You're listening so you can learn from it. Because there's a difference between you can sit with someone, have a whole conversation, and they're not responding to you because they're like, okay, yeah, it's whatever. You have to talk, good talk, and then there's also someone that you have a conversation with and you're learning from them as much as they're learning from you. And support, it just goes a long way. I'm not just saying like support is just you being there materialistically buying them things, giving them this, because you don't want to confuse support with enabling. You don't want to confuse the two, because some people are like, okay, well, if I support him, I'll just let him have a drink or two or give him a pack of cigarettes. There's a difference. There is a difference between supporting and enabling, and you need to know there's a fine line between the two before you proceed to help someone. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of dedication because there's going to be highs and lows, and when it gets low, it's going to be low, and you just have to brace yourself for that kind of impact. Like I said, with witnessing one of my students going into the system, I was like, wow, like it really broke me. It really broke me to the point where I was like, I don't think I can face these kids anymore because if I failed one, imagine how many more I'm going to fail. And I don't want to have that kind of responsibility on my hands. But, I had to mentally knock myself out of that mentality and be like, you need to approach it in another way. It's always all about approach too. You have to break the negative thinking, break the cycles, break, negative impacts. That would stop you from helping these people that need the help that they need.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. And then just because I know there's this question too, as if that schools are with Dr. Yaneta, she mentioned that some schools don't allow sex education, and so it's kind of hard for individuals and youth to actually understand what's going on with them. So, do you think that schools should also implement some kind of program? So, you know, initiating that conversation within the schools. Do you think that should be a thing?
Yes. Because it goes back with like sex education. I remember when I was in high school, they were trying to incorporate sex education, but so many parents were against it. They're like, no, once they know about it, they're gonna do it. But I beg to differ. I say because like, it goes with curiosity. Like the less you know, for youth, as me too, growing up, the less I knew about something, the more I wanted to go do it. Like I wanted to, like, okay, I want to go see what the hype is about. Since it's so restricted and it's so like, oh, you can't do this, it just makes a youth like want to go do it. So I feel like again, it goes back to knowledge. Knowing stuff and educating yourself on certain situations, and because knowledge is power. So once you know the consequences of stuff, you're most likely like, okay, I can't do it. Or also, at least you'll know your limits by then, huh? You know what you can do and what you should do. Or like going back to like drinking, I know the drinking age is 21 and the smoking age is 18. So it's like these are both like drugs, but yet they have different age limits. So I feel like that's another thing. It's like if you knew the effects it had on you, you would be able to limit yourself in approaching these stuff. So if you knew that you can't handle your drink, you'll probably move up your age limits. Like, okay, I'll probably not drink until like 25 or 28. And then if like smoking is not for you, be like, okay, maybe like once a day kind of thing. So I feel like if we were to address these situations, both just like sex education should be in school. Incorporating a drug class too to like vice and narcotics in the system, it'll definitely be a learning experience and a life-changing one too. So that way these kids will be able to learn it in the classroom instead of going out onto the streets and trying it out for themselves. So
of course, that's what someone else said, that we need to break that cycle of like not communicating that with the students. And so I think you have at least two more questions.
okay.
So one is, how can we bring awareness to these taboo subjects and to our community? So I'm guessing like in our villages, like how can we do that with our churches, Uncle Vo?
I think that's where it should start. I think the youth needs to start speaking up on it during youth meetings, because I've noticed in a lot of churches, or at least the ones that I go to, it's always like it's for the youth, yet the people that are in charge of like implementing the program, it's the old folks. And I'm just looking at them like, how do you know what we want? How do you know what we need if you guys can't even allow us the space or the freedom to proceed as we wish? Because we would like give out our ideas and they're like, oh no, but I'm like, well, that's how you can approach the youth, is approaching them in a youth mindset. You can't tell the youth what to do and like not listen, like, sorry, you can't ask the youth what they want, and then when they tell you what they want, you don't listen. You're like, no, that's too much. No, that's a lot. I think it has to start from us, because if they can't change it, we have to change it. And I don't want it to be like, because very Samoan and be like, okay, overfeel popoko, kiki and stuff like that. But really, it's like, just hear me out. Just listen to me. Or maybe you just have to find a way to approach it, because our old folks are very stubborn. They're very old school. They're so rooted in what our culture used to be, instead of like
what it needs to be.
What it needs to be. Yes. Because the days are different now.
Sorry.
Yeah, because it's so the times are different now. Things are so much simpler back then, but now it's like the world is changing. So are we. And I'm not necessarily saying change the culture. I'm just saying there should be some stuff that we need to incorporate to better understand, or to better ourselves and our people moving forward.
And like you mentioned, having people listen to understand and learn instead of listening just to listen, just
Yes.
to like nonchalantly pass your idea over and like not even think about it. So I think things like that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
But I, on behalf of us here at Alliance, thank you so much for speaking on that and for providing like so much of a different point of perspective, because I think we need that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you again, Alliance. I appreciate you guys for always reaching out to me. I'm pretty sure some of you guys are probably tired of me and appearing in so many Alliance talk, but it's such a good platform, and we need to work together. And you guys are doing a pretty good job in causing this awareness in our community. So, fatai lava, malo lava ya te to from ni atile tui to ngadwenga, when you foi le asos faso fua.
Bye. Fase for. Alrighty, so we will actually be going, or we would like to apologize for the absence of Dr. Jean Anderson. Due to unforeseen circumstances, she will not be able to attend nor speak at this event. So we wanted to go into a quick 5 minute break because I know that because of there's so much conversation going on, there's so much great ideas and thoughts and opinions. We would want you to at least take a break, water break, snack break, whatever you feel like doing. But please turn off your cameras, mute your microphones, come back later in 5 minutes, and also check out some of these PSAs that we have. So we'll all see you in 5 minutes.
Talofa America Samoa, the COVID vaccines are here. Having a vaccine available is a really important step in ending the pandemic, and we have 2 types of vaccines here now, but they won't do any good stuck in a freezer. I know some people are worried that these new vaccines might need more study, but the data has shown that they're both safe and effective. Millions of healthcare workers have already gotten their 2 doses. You also may have heard about people feeling a bit sick after getting their COVID vaccine, but please don't let that deter you. The vaccine is designed to train your immune system to fight off COVID. Side effects don't last that long, and there's no virus in the vaccine and no preservatives to worry about either. Soon, it's going to be your turn. So get your questions answered now and be ready to line up as soon as you're able. We don't want you to miss out on your shot.